Hello and welcome to the Camo Grind, a series where I analyze every weapon in Advanced Warfare to help you complete every camo challenge by giving specific strategies, loadouts, and more, including ranking every weapon variant in order of usefulness based on several factors to give you an idea of what you should use and what you should redeem. I don't, however, just make this stuff up. My advice and opinions are based on thorough testing, in-game coded stats, and of course my own experiences in using these weapons and weapon variants, of which I own many, to complete every marksman challenge and earn every royalty camo. Today's episode is on 2 assault rifles and 2 LMGs, a bit of a mixed bag. The ARX-160, HBRa3, Pytaek, and the Ameli. We shall start right away with the ARX-160. It used to be ignored in favor of the IMR as the better burst assault rifle, but with a couple buffs and the discovery of some great variants, a lot of people started to favor this gun. This is a case where the variants make a big deal, unlike the last episode with the sniper rifles, and for that reason you've probably heard of the top couple variants here. First being the hole puncher. The super important feature of this variant is that it buffs your medium range damage from 32 to 35, allowing for a 1 burst kill at medium range. And your short range damage is already 35, and that doesn't change, but your short range is only about 7 meters, which is very short in this game. That's only a few body lengths away from you. This damage buff extends that 35 damage out to over 50 meters, which is very long. That makes this gun a lot better. Your long range is also buffed to a 4-shot kill instead of a 5, but because that 50 meters is so long, like I said, that isn't as helpful. And with the only downsides of the hole puncher being a small hipfire and recoil nerf, it has to be the #1 variant for the ARX. And in second we have the steel bite. It is the other variant to have this all-important medium range damage buff, although it doesn't have more of a damage buff than the hole puncher like it kind of indicates. It has the same damage buff, but it also changes the surface penetration from medium to high, which I just don't find to be very useful in pretty much all scenarios. The only thing that makes the steel bite worse than the hole puncher is that it has a small fire rate decrease, but regardless it's still a very good variant, and these two are clearly far above the rest in my mind. So the third variant here, I guess it's just the next best thing. It has a fire rate increase and a small aim down sight time nerf, so I'd say that's a worthwhile trade-off, but these first two are in a whole different tier, I think. So these variants are alright, nothing crazy good, and then these variants are, well, not so good, and the damnation all the way down here at the bottom. What happened here? I just don't really like this thing. The damage nerf, admittedly, isn't a big deal. It is only at the long range, which, as we discussed, that's very far for this weapon, and it buffs your long range too, which helps you not reach that damage even more. But that little damage for range thing is a pointless trade-off, because it'd be better to just keep your damage and not worry about it. So the only other thing it does is that you're lowering your fire rate for better recoil, so I guess it's meant to be like an accurate weapon. I don't know, I would rather not lower my fire rate. Maybe if this variant buffed your fire rate instead and lowered your recoil and stuff and kept everything else the same, it'd be up here in 3rd or 4th, but with the way it is, I just don't think it's worth it for any reason. Now onto the HBRa3, which I would consider to be one of the top tier weapons in the game. Not the best, I think we all have 2 guns in mind when we're talking about the best, but if there were a tier system, it would have to be among the best. It is very viable. If I was setting up a few tryhard classes, this would be one of them. It is very strong, especially with the right variants, so I think we saw the #1 coming here, the Insanity, a crazy fire rate increase and a long range damage increase that may come into play because the long range drop off is a bit shorter than something like the ARX, in exchange for a small hipfire nerf and an attachment limitation that doesn't allow any optical attachments. For me, I don't mind the iron sights. They aren't the best, but they're okay, so that's a subjective part of this variant. If you hate the iron sights, then you will hate this variant, but the other nerf of losing 10% hipfire accuracy, that's just not a big deal, so I would say this is a very solid variant, as long as you don't mind the iron sights. And up next is the Average Joe, yet another marksman variant, making it to the top 3. We have covered what are, in my mind, the top 3 marksman variants in the past couple episodes. Most of them are unfortunately trash, but the Average Joe is alright. It buffs your long range damage up to 25, like the Insanity, but because there's no crazy fire rate increase or any limitation on scopes, you're more likely to be using that long range damage, so I think it's a good thing to just eliminate that potential 5-shot kill completely, especially because the only downside you have to worry about for this weapon is a 20% hipfire nerf, and when I think of the HBR, hipfire isn't really what comes to mind, so I'm okay with that. And in third, I put the Raider. It is actually pretty similar to the Insanity. It has the same initial rate of fire buff, that is the first 5 shots of the weapon. If you didn't know, the first 5 shots of the HBR shoot faster than the rest if you're holding down the trigger, basically the opposite of the Bal 27, which has to wind up. But the fire rate after those first 5 shots are then slower than the Insanity for the Raider, but they're still buffed over the base variant, so this is another good option if you want to increase your rate of fire. You also get a small aim down sight time buff, and there are no attachment limitations for you fans of sight attachments. The nerfs that you have to keep in mind are a small recoil nerf and 4 fewer shots in your magazine, which really doesn't seem like a lot, but you may consider extended mag. Since the weapon also comes with that higher rate of fire, you might be running out of ammo faster than you'd like. Now I put the Bare Fist here because some people seem to like it. I don't know, I'm not a big fan. I don't know if I would use it personally. The weird thing is, it's based around hipfire. You get a big hipfire increase, and the long range is nerfed, so you're meant to be fighting up close, I guess. But then it comes with a free red dot sight, which is like, what? Now I'm trying to be precise at long range? I don't know. For an intimidating name like Bare Fist, it's a bit odd that it's not that helpful. And speaking of not helpful, I don't really think any of these other HBR variants are worth using. You can let me know if you really like one of these and think I'm wrong to say these are bad. But there we have the 2 assault rifles finished. It is time to take a look at the Pytaek. So the Pytaek here is a very unique weapon with the 0 recoil after 10 shots thing, and these variants are really weird. When it came to this weapon, Sledgehammer was like, hey, I think we haven't messed with the players enough with all our nonsense red herring info bars on the weapon variants that lie about the actual performance of the gun. Let's really mess them up with these ones. So there's often more than meets the eye with these Pytaek variants. Starting off with the Pytaek loophole. Truly a loophole in the game. They knew what they were doing with this misleading crap. Ignore what the variant tells you because this is a purely bonus variant. Your magazine size goes up to 150, your view kick decreases, and your hipfire is tightened, as in a good thing, by 30%, even though it appears like it should be 30% worse. All positive changes on this thing, no reason not to use this weapon if you have it. By the way, you may know about this, the loophole used to also secretly buff your damage quite considerably at every range, making this thing crazy good compared to the other variants. But the loophole no longer changes your damage. Ever since there was a weapon rebalancing patch where they rebalanced the Pytaek, what they did is they brought all the other variants, including the base variant, to match the damage buff that the loophole used to have. So I figured I should mention that there is no longer a secret damage buff on the loophole, but it is still pretty good. This leads to the other elite, the exploit, so I'll briefly mention it. The exploit used to be really good as well. If I was making this video a few months ago, it would be ranked up right behind the loophole in second place, but it was made pretty bad after that patch. So it used to make sense, the exploit and the loophole, there was a common theme there. But you can no longer exploit the exploit because now it's pretty bad. Let's talk about the variant in second place though, which is the Hasty, another marksman variant up here in second place, but it isn't anything too good. It increases your rate of fire and magazine capacity in exchange for a recoil nerf, which does make this pretty hard to control, but remember, only for the first 10 shots. After that, the recoil will be non-existent, so that recoil nerf combined with the rate of fire increase will not matter at all to the recoil. It will just be sending more damage downrange. And keep in mind that higher rate of fire will help you reach that point of no recoil faster than you normally would, so that's good combo there, and that makes this a great weapon if you use it to that strength. If you kind of hold down the trigger and get on your long-range suppression grind, this could be pretty good in some objective modes, maybe less viable in TDM, because those first 10 shots are going to be what matters most of the time. That's why you don't see this weapon used much. It's not that bad, it's just odd. In fact, I will venture a little further and say I am personally a fan of this thing. It's very easy to use, and the fact that you're encouraged to hold down the trigger and keep spraying usually leads to some crazy kill feeds that would just never happen with a BAL or an ASM1. I just hopped on AW here to make some custom classes for this video, as I usually like to do, and I wanted to unlock the quick draw grip, which I would say is pretty essential, and even without that attachment in this game, I was destroying people. It wasn't very hard, and I would consider myself very out of practice when it comes to AW. I haven't really touched a controller in a long time. I have leveled up in this game maybe 3 times in the past 5 months. It's not that I dislike the game, it's just a mixture of not having much time and the fact that I have completed the game in my mind. I have accomplished my my goal of these camo challenges. Now my true calling is this series of videos. Anyway, if you never gave this thing much of a chance, maybe you should. I'll just say that. In third, we have the Eradicator, which is the only Pytaek variant to buff your damage. It only changes the long range, but it makes it so that your damage is 35 across the board at every range, meaning the nerf of this weapon being a long range nerf does not matter at all, since by buffing the damage, you're essentially increasing your range out to infinity, so there's a good, kind of no downside variant there. The Magnified is the only other thing I might say is worth using, and a lot of variants here do not appeal to me. Let's get to the last weapon of the video, being the Ameli, or the Ameli. Probably the most popular heavy weapon because it really isn't too bad, but still not that popular overall because you don't want to be slow in this game, and there are obviously better choices. I put the Heavy as the best variant, just like the Eradicator variant up here. Your long range damage is buffed and you are left with 35 damage across the board, so 3-shot kills everywhere, and you only have to deal with a 10% hipfire nerf, not the end of the world. The Subverter is in second, and it is the only other Ameli to buff damage. It also shares the same 35 damage at long range, but this time the +2 damage is not a lie. What happens here is your short range damage is increased to 49. That's quite a big jump, but you'll notice of course right away that that isn't quite 50, so it isn't quite a 2-shot kill, which means even though this sounds impressive all the way up to 49, it's one of those damage buffs that doesn't directly change the shots to kill. You're just more likely to kill faster in some scenarios when an enemy is already injured, which is kinda rare in a game like Call of Duty when you heal very quickly, and that extra bit of damage buff hardly seems worth cutting the magazine size in half down to 50. That can be pretty annoying considering how long it takes to reload this thing. Extended mags are a good option, and that is even more true for the Chicanery here in third, because it also gets cut down to 50 shots, and it comes with a rate of fire buff and a free advanced rifling attachment, but with that rate of fire buff you will run out of ammo pretty quickly. Otherwise, this is a very solid variant. Have a few other viable options here, and then we come to the Whalehorn. I definitely have quite the history with this thing because I must have gotten this item more than any other elite in supply drops. I redeemed it countless times, and I always thought it would just seem laughably terrible by looking at it. I have heard some arguments saying that it isn't that bad, and I see how it can be used with like gung-ho and lightweight and speed perks and a laser sight and that stuff. It is a pretty funny weapon because the hipfire is very tight. That is the main focus of this variant. But in no way would I say this is a practical weapon, especially now that the XMG hipfire has been buffed not only once, but twice. Before, it was like, well, you kinda need to use lockdown mode to use this thing effectively, then they buffed it and it became viable to run and gun, and now suddenly they buffed it again and it's borderline overpowered to run and gun with those things. And I would say they beat the Ameli Whalehorn when it comes to hipfire every day of the week, so no real reason to use it unless you feel like hipfiring an LMG. So that wraps up the second to last episode. We only have one more to go. That's a pretty cool thing to me. With it being the last episode, we'll be covering another mixed bag of weapons, starting with the 2 remaining shotguns, the TAC-19 and Bulldog, and then just tacking on the Stinger M7 and the Heavy Shield. You might be wondering what the Heavy Shield will be about, because it doesn't have any variants or camo challenges, but there is a 500 kills marksman challenge, so I'll just give some general Heavy Shield classes and advice for that. Funny that the series basically started with how hard the challenges were for the Moz and the Mayhem, and now it will end with the Stinger, the one launcher that was left out due to it not being very hard. I hope you've learned something about the assault rifle and heavy variants we covered, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.